80 people are killed and more than 100 are injured in bomb attacks by Islamic State in Baghdad. Meanwhile, in the week's top stories here in RT, days after the Istanbul airport massacre, reports have emerged about the identities of the suicide bombers as well as the mastermind of the attack. He's believed to be a top ISIL recruiter from Russia's North Caucasus region. Also,
and I said that I wanted to lead a campaign to get Britain to leave the European Union. You all laughed at me. Well, I have to say, you're not laughing now, are you?
That's the last time you are applauding here.
Well, sparks fly when Nigel Farage from the Brexit movement comes face to face with the European Commission President in Brussels. And from defiance to admission, Turkey apologises for shooting down a Russian military jet last November. The incident led to the worst deterioration of Turkish-Russian relations in recent history. Hello there, the latest developments and a look back at the last 7 days too. You're watching the weekly here on RT International. Now we'll start with the news that two powerful explosions have hit northern and central parts of the Iraqi capital. Authorities have just revised the number of casualties. They say 80 are dead and more than 100 are injured. Islamic State says it's behind the attack. The first blast occurred in a crowded shopping area. Well, a fire started by the first bomb in the Negara district has destroyed a large number of shops. RT spoke to an eyewitness.
This explosion damaged a lot of buildings in this area and destroyed a Shia mosque in this district. This is a very popular place for people, and it's a very famous market in Baghdad, and even also it's a Shia district, and people at this time they are go to the restaurants to take food in Ramadan.
The attacks do come 2 weeks after the Iraqi army liberated the city of Fallujah from Islamic State. The operation began in late May and took nearly a month. Islamic State had held Fallujah since January of 2014. Its liberation was hailed as a key victory in the Iraqi government's campaign against the terrorists. Experts we asked, though, say the latest attacks on the Iraqi capital are in revenge for losses like Fallujah.
As the Iraqi forces continue to push for the decisive battle to liberate the city of Mosul, it seems that the Daesh militants or the terrorists are sort of trying to ramp up their attacks, terrorist attacks in the Iraqi capital Baghdad to sort of force the Iraqi central government to drag or to withdraw troops from the battlefield into the Iraqi capital to sort of boost security inside the Iraqi capital.
The fact that we've seen these pretty high-profile attacks that have claimed hundreds of casualties just over the last few days indicates that there is coordination that is taking place. And the Islamic State claims to be an international organization, and they have to carry out these attacks in order to maintain their reputation as a deadly as well as a well-coordinated organization that has the capacity to strike fear and terror in many different geopolitical regions.
Each of these bombings, the exact reason, certainly during the holy month of Ramadan and as people have been fasting and just after the fall of Fallujah, maybe that's the most recent excuse and the most recent cause. But nevertheless, this is an everyday occurrence now in the region, and that is something that never ever existed before the U.S. war and occupation.
Meanwhile, Turkey has been mourning the victims of Tuesday's attack on Ataturk airport in Istanbul. The death toll from the triple suicide bombings has now risen to 45 and dozens more remain in hospital, some in a critical condition. One of the blasts was captured on security camera. A word of warning, though, the following footage is graphic. Here you can see people running in panic as shots are fired. Then the first explosion shakes the terminal. And here you can see one of the suicide bombers running through the Terminal 2 before being shot by a security guard and falling to the ground. An assault rifle is then seen sliding across the floor. After approaching the attacker, the guard appears to see the bomb vest. He then runs for cover before it's detonated. The three bombers are reportedly from the North Caucasus region of Russia, Uzbekistan and Kyrgyzstan, and all have links to Islamic State. Witnesses spoke about the horror of the attack.
Shotgun bomb. My husband saw a man from, I guess he was 1 meter from us, far from us. He opened his shirt, there was a bomb here. Yeah, he went down and after, I guess, 1 minute maybe explode.
The blast woke me up and it was very, very close, and then the gunfire and the shooting. And first you think you're on a film, you know, but then people started running and I just ran with them. I grabbed my stuff and ran.
Turkey has reportedly asked the US to help track down a Chechen ISIL commander who's said to be the mastermind of the attack in Istanbul. He's thought to be known to US and Russian intelligence officials. Earlier in the week, I spoke to Nikki Aaron about the suspect.
He's been identified as Ahmed Çatayev, and he's said to be the brains behind Tuesday's horrific attack at Ataturk airport in Istanbul. And now these claims are according to Turkish media. They haven't been confirmed at this point, but I can tell you a lot about this man who has a very interesting past. He's a man who Russian secret services named as the main recruiter of ISIL terrorists to Russia and European countries back in January. And back in the mid-1990s and early 2000s, when the Russian government waged 2 anti-terror campaigns against militants in the North Caucasus, this is when he first came to their attention. He was named as a person of interest during this time and earns the nickname Ahmed One Arm. He allegedly lost one of his arms during the Chechen conflict. He was able to leave Russia 12 years ago and he was granted asylum in Austria. And despite being on Russia's wanted list even since 2003 for terrorist activities. Now, despite Russia's warnings, he was welcomed into the West with open arms and granted this asylum, and he's been able to move freely across Europe and post-Soviet states. And by no means has he been lying low during this time. He's been arrested multiple times and in various countries across Europe. And if we take a look back at his history, it really would send alarm bells ringing.
In 2003, Ahmed Çatayev, wanted by Russia, is granted asylum in Austria, allowing him to travel freely across Europe. And he didn't keep a low profile. He was arrested multiple times in different countries. In 2008, he was arrested with ammunition and guns in Sweden and jailed. The same year, he was added to the Interpol wanted list by Russia. After his release, he was arrested yet again, this time in Ukraine, where he was found with bomb-making manuals and photos of terror victims. Following this, Russia demanded his extradition, but rights groups opposed the move. Amnesty International urged Ukrainian authorities not to extradite Çatayev to Russia, amid fears he would be at risk of torture and other grave human rights violations. In 2011, he was arrested at the Bulgarian-Turkish border. Russian pleas for his extradition were again denied. A year later in Georgia, he was arrested in an anti-terror operation and charged with illegal arms possession. Extradition was again refused. In 2015, reports emerged that Çatayev had entered Syria and joined Islamic State. He's finally put on the US terror list.
So despite being on Russia's wanted list since 2003, it wasn't until 2015 that he was actually added to the US and the UN terror lists. This comes after numerous warnings from Russia about the threat that this man poses. They were completely ignored.
And that does beg the question, doesn't it? Why were those warnings ignored?
The Russian authorities have once described what they call double standards, in the people that they've highlighted as people of interest, especially people branded terrorists from the North Caucasus, have been welcomed by the West, by the Western media, by Western politicians, and branded freedom fighters and shielded with these protection laws, which means that they can't be extradited back to Russia where they'd face penalties. Now, what's really worrying is that if this man, CederaUh, is confirmed to be the mastermind behind Tuesday's horrific attack, he could be just one of a number of people who have been branded by Russia as terrorists, yet welcome into the West and able to move freely around.